You know, there's that whole story, I think, where an Apple came out with their like health, app, and they didn't put the menstrual cycle in because it's like not considered a vital sign.
Yeah, did I deal with depression? Did I deal with, I don't even remember. I didn't even question how I felt. I assumed it was just me being me.
Let's give some real information around this. And then also let's present alternatives. There are no alternatives.
I'm Mayim Bialik, and welcome to my breakdown. This is the place where we break down the things that make you break down.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you because you know she knows a thing or two. So now she's gonna break down. It's a breakdown. She's gonna break it down.
Today, we're going to be breaking down the patriarchy. I'm just kidding, but not really. We're going to be talking about the pill. And by the pill, I mean the birth control pill. We have really, really, really exciting guests. We have Ricki and Abby Epstein joining us to break down the pill and its impact on women's mental health. Very, very exciting. I'm very excited. I can tell that Jonathan Cohen is excited. Please say hello to Jonathan Cohen.
Hello, Mayim.
The man who's wearing a Henley and shouldn't be.
If you're only listening to the audio version of this podcast, consider checking out Mayim Bialik's YouTube channel, and you'll see that she has rips in her shirt.
That's a look. What's your excuse?
On purpose, it's a look. You pay extra for the rips, which I hear is very trendy.
I don't know why putting more clothing on your frame makes you look more lanky.
I'm basically a toddler with a hat on.
You're a skinny toddler with a hat on. My toddlers were very plump. You're the other kind of toddler.
I'm the other kind, just the long limbs, small head, but I guess that's backwards for toddlers because usually they have big heads.
This is not a good metaphor.
No, I'm going to end here and encourage people to subscribe to the podcast, give us a review, and share with a friend because 1 in 5 people struggle with mental health or addiction. We all know someone who is struggling or has struggled, and there is really good, helpful advice here. Mayim has a lot of information, and our guests today have been breaking down women's health for quite some time.
Well, really the health of our world through the lens of women's health, which impacts all of us.
The industrial medical complex?
Correct. I think one of my criticisms for you, Jonathan Cohen, is that you don't sound excited enough. It could be because you're Canadian.
I generally don't like to get too excited because that's followed with disappointment.
Like you also could be reading like stock numbers. Let's start off with the word of the day. Word of the day.
The word of the day today is self-medicating.
Oh. The word of the day is self-medicating. And one of the goals of word of the day is for me not to speak for an excessively long amount of time.
Let's do it. Let's try. Tell us what it, well, it's pretty broad.
This is not a long one.
Okay.
So self-medicating is a term that we use to describe people who have found ways to specifically support their mental health on their own. And one of the most common ways that people self-medicate, I think these days, is with marijuana. And that's not to say that there are not many medical uses for marijuana, or that people who are using marijuana are not using them for very specific reasons. But what often happens with something like marijuana is that people self-medicate for other things that simply aren't being dealt with, either in a clinical setting or a therapeutic setting, meaning instead of going to therapy or instead of figuring out why you have panic attacks and instead of figuring out why
you can't
relationships terrify you or you can't sleep, you smoke a lot of weed. That's self-medicating. A lot of times people who have mental health challenges, who are non-medication compliant, a lot of times people who are bipolar in particular do not like to take medication. So they often find other ways to cope. Marijuana can be one of those because it keeps the mania a little bit at bay. Also can help the depression, and that's self-medicating. And alcohol also is used very commonly to self-medicate for social anxiety, I would say. I think many people who, need to have a couple drinks to be comfortable at a party. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a couple drinks to go to a party, but technically it's self-medicating for figuring out what is it about the situation. Yes, it's much quicker to self-medicate, but it can also mask other more complicated problems. So that's typically what we talk about with self-medicating. So it's not a bad word. It's not a good word. Let's just call it a neutral word of the day.
One question, is self-medicating always taking something, or is sometimes
Oh.
self-medicating a behavior?
I mean, I think because I'm a neuroscientist, everything we do causes a chain of, hormonal and chemical reactions. You can self-medicate with sex. You can self-medicate with work. You can self-medicate with sugar. Obviously, nicotine, caffeine, those are technically self-medicating things as well. But I think for the vernacular, we typically think of self-medicating as things like pot or alcohol, instead of or in place of also seeking other help, which is not to say that those things don't help. And I'm not saying you have a problem if you're self-medicating, but that's the word of the day. All right, let's break down women's health and the pill. I'm going to say something that sounds very, very possibly an oversimplification. Women's health and men's health are different.
Are they? Tell us how.
They are. And I'm going to say this with a caveat that I am a progressive person. I'm a liberal person. I'm a person supportive of the entire gender spectrum. I am an LGBTQIA plus ally. Some of my favorite people are one of those letters or several. But that being said, women's health and men's health are generally different. There are certain things that are the same, but there are certain things that are very different. The nature of the last 200 years or so of medicine has been biased in the medical world the way our culture is biased, and it's been biased towards men. So what does that look like? A lot of people are like, that's not true. She's just a feminist. This really comes down to a disproportionate amount, in many cases, of funding for men's health in many areas of medicine. And a lot of that is because the medical field has been open to men in ways that it has not been open to women for the same amount of time. And there's an unequal distribution of interest, I think, in certain arenas of health. Sigmund Freud did many incredible things for the field of medicine and psychology in particular. But one of the things where he missed the mark was he examined women who were having very, very complex problems. And, he was part of a movement of dismissing women really as essentially hysterical. His analysis of women was possibly a little more elaborate, but essentially it was the same kind of notion that we don't know how to deal with women. But one of the areas of women's health that I think has been the most misunderstood is psychiatry and mood disorders. And, I've heard it joke that women, we've been battling breast cancer on a very, very public level and ovarian cancer for a very long time. And then prostate cancer came around and men were like, wait a second, what happens to what part of my body? And instantly cured, and obviously those are different cancers. I'm saying that, with a grain of salt, very tongue in cheek. The notion that women having strong emotions is a sign of insanity is very outdated and unacceptable and should have been. And the expression of women's behavior has been limited by a culture that really for all of our history in this iteration kept women in the home, close to, berry picking and basket weaving and children. My grandmother, on my mother's side, we don't even think she finished elementary school. She was raised in a village without electricity at the Czech-Hungary border. She was a tailor. Her parents were cigarette peddlers. They peddled cigarettes on the street. She came to this country as an orphan teenager, separated from all of her siblings during the war. She met my grandfather in night school, and she was very, very sad her entire life. She had chronic depression and psychosis. My father's mother was a housewife because that's what you were supposed to be in the 1950s. And everything was instant. All of the time she had been spending doing housework was replaced by the microwave and, plastic and all those things. And she was not a happy woman at all. She was not a happy woman. You know, my grandfather worked 6 days a week and my grandmother was stuck in Long Island. Like this was how a lot of women's lives were. And what both of my grandmothers needed, you know, was a community of other women. And my mom's mother worked in a sweatshop, you know, with a bunch of other women sitting at sewing machines. She didn't speak English. And my dad's mom, you know, abused painkillers because that's what you also did in the 1950s. So especially during World War II and post-World War II, women were really expected to be satisfied with that kind of being their life because that's how it's supposed to be. And enter the women's movement, which my grandmothers were not a part of. But the women's movement was a slow simmering that over time had acknowledged that even when black men were granted the right to vote, women still could not. Women wanted to be able to get an education if they wanted to. The notion was that women should be given the opportunity to decide their fate, as it were. And many women want to stay home and have children. They should be allowed to do that. And for those that don't, they should be given the opportunity to not do that. So one of the most significant outcomes of the women's movement was the widespread use and acceptance of a birth control pill. And this pill allowed women to control their fertility and decide when they wanted to get pregnant or if they wanted to get pregnant at all. The birth control pills had many different iterations, and people love to point out, like, there's so many different ones. It's so gentle. Okay, but essentially what a birth control pill is you take every day hormones packed into little pills, and every day you take one. And those pills give you hormones that make your body think that it's pregnant. And what happens when you're pregnant is you don't produce an egg. So if there's no egg, you can't get pregnant. And for a week of the month, you either take sugar pills or a lower dose. I think it's fascinating, but we don't need to get into the details. And you have essentially like a simulated period. But technically it's not an egg. There wasn't an egg produced. There's a lot we still also don't always know, but about this kind of choreography. But there's a lot that we do know. So the introduction of the pill caused a tremendous social shift. Now, women have been preventing themselves from getting pregnant for all of human history, and we have some really fascinating, ancient evidence of how women would not get pregnant.
Tell us about those.
No,
Mayim.
I don't really want to get into it, but there's ways. And midwives and shamans and those kinds of women have long known ways to introduce certain herbs and chemicals, into the body to prevent pregnancy.
Breastfeeding for extended periods of time for some women.
Breastfeeding can, as a lactation educator counselor, I have to say, breastfeeding can serve as birth control, as it were. But let's pretend like you don't want to have a baby in order to not have a baby. It's kind of, So the introduction of the pill caused a tremendous shift. So unmarried women were able to have sex without getting pregnant, which is enormously significant because you didn't have to get married to have sex, or you didn't have to risk an abortion, which is still illegal many places. And very, very, when we make abortion illegal, it hurts women because you cannot force a woman, in my opinion, you cannot force a woman to have a child if, for whatever reason, she is not prepared to have that child. So women will go to any lengths to not have that impact their lives, and that often is very, very tragic. The question of abortion rights kind of became intermixed with this issue of the pill when actually those are separate issues. You had a question, Jonathan, about kind of how our cycles actually connect to our emotional worlds.
I do have a question. I know a lot of hippies in Los Angeles and elsewhere, and they hold women's circles, ceremonies, monthly groups, all related to the cycle of the moon and the full moon.
Okay.
My question is, from a neuroscience perspective, what is your understanding of the female cycle and its relationship to the moon and the tides? And
well, this is, less of a neuroscience question and more of a what's your perspective on being female? So for thousands of years, Jewish women have honored the moon. It is called Rosh Chodesh, and it is a holiday. To this day, religious schools take off for Rosh Chodesh. It is a women's holiday because, yes, women's bodies are on a monthly cycle. And in many creation myths, the sun rules by day, and that's the masculine kind of notion of like, I'm in charge of all the things that are hot. The private and shadowy aspects of our existence are governed by the moon, and women's cycles do mimic the moon. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are like, I'm not regular. I don't know what she's talking about. Totally fine. But the cycle of our body is such that we produce an egg once a month. That egg grows and changes, and especially when you get pregnant, it does mimic nature's very redundant, She's very redundant. And so we have, our body grows the way a moon grows and waxes and wanes. I actually started a Rosh Chodesh group in college with another friend of mine. And we did something that most of us had never done before. We got together with a group of women. We talked about our feelings once a month. And many of these women were not even like religiously inclined, but it can be a beautiful way to honor what historically, has been a very well-preserved time of the month. And the notion of like, oh, the red tent and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there are many, many cultures who really despise menstrual blood, fear it, and fear the changes that come with it. However, as Anita Diamond in her book, The Red Tent, kind of revolutionized, like, the sacred time that women spend with each other when we are together, because we're separated from, other aspects of our masculine culture, is also very special. And, one of the concepts, again, in traditional Judaism is that the loss of an egg is a time to retreat from your partner, specifically your husband, because you've experienced death, right? Every time you shed the lining of your uterus, that could have been a baby, right? Like, that's really what it means. That could have been a baby. And that time is a time of emotional complexity. And yes, you're dealing with physical aspects of your body that are kind of crazy. When my children were very little, they called it bloody weirdness. Because they were small people with small words. And I said, that bloody weirdness is why you're here. And then they never called it bloody weirdness again.
Not really PC.
It's also not PC, but they were like 4. It's, So that's the longer answer to, our connection with the moon. And in terms of our kind of emotional health, the cycle of the month, again, we got a lot of people who are going to be like, I don't know when it's my period. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Like, I just take the injections and I never know. Totally fine. If that's how you want to do it, great. Our guests will have something to say about that. And I have something to say about that too. The rhythm of a woman's body is designed like that of an animal. And I don't mean that women are animals, like in a bad way.
All humans are animals.
All humans are animals. But in particular, here it is, folks. When women have an egg available in their body, it only happens once a month for us. Once a month, you get an egg. And our brains have not evolved to the point where they know, I'm living my best life. I don't think I want to have kids. I can be like men. I can have as much sex as I want. It doesn't matter. Sure, you can absolutely be like men, have as much sex as you want. It doesn't matter. But what your hormones are primed to do is to find a desirable situation for that egg. And eggs are expensive and sperm is cheap. And the reason we say that is that men produce sperm every day, all day. Men do not have there are cycles to men. I don't want you to feel bad. You have them too.
That's another episode.
But men can be fertile every day, all day. And women are fertile for a very, very small window of the month. Human animals are fertile for a very small window of the month. So during that time that you are ovulating, when that egg is waiting and available, your body and your emotions are primed towards finding the person who can make that egg happiest. And your body is primed to make the environment happiest to get that egg happy.
There's even been studies that...
You're not going to let that sit for a second?
Well, sure. Yeah, okay. Let's let it sit. But sometimes I have to jump in or you just keep going. There have been studies, which maybe our intern Tiffany will find for us, where women who are ovulating are attracted to a different type of man than when they're not ovulating. And there have been studies where women who are on birth control versus women who are not on birth control are attracted to a different type of pheromone when they smell a potential mate's t-shirt than when they are. So
Not just a t-shirt, but yes, anything
well,
with that
I
scent.
think the experiment was with t-shirts so that the participants weren't going around smelling
the
armpits.
t-shirt sex experiment. Which t-shirt makes you want to have sex with that person more?
The point of this was that
Or what about a Henley?
I'll put a rip on the side so that the pheromones can exit better. But I think the point here is that women's natural biological perception and mate selection was altered.
Correct.
Both by the time of the month and
Correct.
if they were on birth control or not.
And we'll talk about this more with Ricki and Abby, because a lot of people say, who cares? Why are y'all even talking about this? I don't want to think about a period. I don't want to know about it. I want to have sex when I want. I know when I want it. Hush up. Completely acceptable. What I would like to offer is the option to get educated about what some of those kind of like natural rhythms are, what hormonal birth control, and not just the pill, but IUDs that give off hormones, the shots that they give you, all of those things are hormonal manipulations of a natural system, which often is not even allowed to find its rhythm because girls are told so young you need to be on the pill, even if they're not sexually active.
There was the SNL sketch where the woman started taking the pill that totally removed the period. And so you like had a period once every 4 months. And then they dramatized what the emotional roller coaster of that period would be.
Yeah. Well, and also, you know, I can speak as someone who's, you know, I've had 2 human children.
Some non-human children?
No, I've had 2 children. I do not believe in hormonal birth control, really. I believe that it exists. I do feel that it is overused, overprescribed, and misunderstood, and do believe that there are many other ways that people can control their fertility. But one of my favorite ways is actually learning what your body does. And I wrote a book called Girling Up about the process by which girls become women. It's a book about puberty and the neuroscience behind puberty.
We'll link to it on the website.
I can't tell you how many grown women on my editorial team emailed me privately to say, I literally didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know what ovulation was. I didn't know what happened the 2 weeks before, the 2 weeks after. I didn't understand. Thank you. The notion of premenstrual syndrome also is one of those things that for me growing up in the 80s and 90s, whenever a male didn't like your behavior, he said, you're PMSing. I did not get my period until I was almost 18 years old. So I had years of being in a terrible mood and annoyed with many, many boys who were wrong. And I said, I don't even have a period. I'm just angry at you. And that felt so empowering, you know? I had many years of not being premenstrual, just angry. What, you can't believe I didn't get my periods until I was 18?
That's a very, very long premenstrual cycle.
I was premenstrual for 18 years.
Anyone who's listening or watching on YouTube right now, if you do want Mayim to go into all the ways that ancient civilizations prevented pregnancy, please submit that as a question on the website under Ask Mayim Anything. And,
you can Google. The Egyptians knew what they were doing.
but if you don't want to Google, because Mayim has all this information that she's just not sharing with us, there's a ton in that brain of hers. If we get enough responses, we'll make her do an episode on it.
Great.
It will be amazing.
Happy to talk about it.
Now I'm actually excited.
Our guests today are women who've dedicated a significant portion, really, of their adult lives to educate and in many cases re-educate women and men, all people, about critical issues facing women, which also affect men.
I can vouch for this. I have seen The Business of Being Born.
You love talking about this.
Well,
you feel like you deserve an award because you watched their documentary.
Before my son was born, I watched that documentary, and I didn't know any of that before I watched it, and I was really blown away.
Ricki Lake is a film actress and a television host. She did have her own show. She was in the original, in Hairspray. She was Tracy in Hairspray. That's where a lot of people know Ricki when she was quite young. She also had a daytime talk show. And Abby Epstein, who is her business partner, is a director and producer, known for Until the Violence Stops and Weed the People. Together, they produce The Business of Being Born. This is the documentary that Jonathan would like an award for watching. It is very important that he watched it. And The Business of Being Born is a documentary about medicated versus unmedicated birth. And the enormous implications for how the medicalization of the birth process has a significant impact, not only on the health of women and their babies, but on our society, our economy, and our perception of what it means to form a family. The film really rocked a generation of parents. The U.S. has the highest rates of maternal and infant mortality in the Western world. And that's what The Business of Being Born examined. I'm going to say that again. The United States has the highest rates of maternal and infant mortality in the Western world. And I'll talk about this with Abby and Ricki. It was one of the films which really secured and confirmed my decision to have my home birth baby. And what Ricki Lake and Abby Epstein are doing, what we're talking about today, is that they've gone on a mission to conquer more and more aspects of women's health. And they are currently working on Sweetening the Pill, which is a documentary that is investigating our current and future choices for contraception. This project focuses on the incredibly troubling statistics surrounding the prescription of the pill, the overuse of the pill, specifically when it is used in brown and black populations to curtail the natural emotional processes of puberty and women's development. I'm going to save my pill story for when we talk to them.
I'm very excited for this interview.
Oh, I thought you were just excited to hear my pill story.
I am excited to hear your pill story. I'm also
You're excited to tell them, I saw the documentary and we had a home birth.
I'm not going to mention that. I
am.
Just out of spite. But I am going to encourage the audience to ask Mayim to share her birth story because that could be a whole episode too. It's phenomenal.
It is a very special and mental health challenging birth story.
I've heard it more than once. If we get enough requests, maybe she'll do it for us.
That's your lullaby every night. Wherever you are. I'm like, are you ready? Ready to hear my birth story again?
Can't go to sleep without it.
That's weird. All right, let's welcome Ricki and Abby.
This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp.
People often ask me, like, how do you keep everything together? The first thing I say is, I really don't. But the second thing I say is therapy. I have to have someone to help me process and talk things through, or I cannot function at my best. If you're having any sort of trouble meeting your goals, difficulty with relationships, trouble sleeping, if you're feeling stressed or depressed or anxious, BetterHelp is available. They offer online professional counselors who can listen and help. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is secure online professional counseling. BetterHelp counselors have a broad range of expertise, which may not be available in your area, but the service is available for clients worldwide. It's so important.
BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches so it's easy and free to change counselors if you need to. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available.
That's so wonderful.
In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp, they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states.
We need this so much right now.
And listeners of this show get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/break.
Visit betterhelp.com/break. Join the over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced, better health professional. There is no shame
in asking for help. This episode is brought to you by Nutrafol.
Thousands of women have taken back control of their hair with Nutrafol. Many are raving that the supplement not only transformed their hair, but restored their confidence too. Nutrafol offers 2 targeted formulas for women clinically shown to improve hair growth and thickness with less shedding through all stages of life. I don't even have enough hair to shed. I need the growth and I need the thickness.
Growth and thickness, that's important.
Healthier hair growth takes time. You'll begin to experience thicker, stronger, faster growing hair in 3 to 6 months. I've already started taking mine. In a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after 6 months. fingers crossed. More than 1,500 top doctors recommend Nutrafol as an effective and high-quality solution for healthier hair. Nutrafol is physician formulated to be 100% drug-free. That's one of the reasons that I'm very excited to be taking it. They use medical-grade botanicals in consistently effective dosages, so you get reliable results. Visit Nutrafol.com and take their hair wellness quiz for personalized product recommendations that are unique to your hair's needs.
You can grow thicker, healthier hair and support our show by going to Nutrafol.com and using promo code BREAKDOWN. And new customers will get 20% off their subscription. This is their best offer available anywhere online.
And you're getting it right here.
Plus free shipping on every order. Get 20% off at Nutrafol.com, Nutrafol.com, promo code BREAKDOWN.
Hello, Ricki and Abby. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's great. Any excuse to talk to you, Mayim. I'm so thrilled.
Thank you. Really, really excited to have you here. And I figured that we would start our conversation with me talking about my pill story, because it feels like if ever there's a place to do that, it's right here. It's not very long, and then you'll get to tell yours if you want. So, as I said in the introduction, to gasps from the Jonathan Cohen corner, I didn't get my period till I was almost 18. That's just the way I was made. And I went to my primary care doctor right around that time because I was having a lot of, I'd call it emotional upset. I mean, I had essentially been anxious my whole life and probably depressed my whole life as well. But when I was 16, 17 is when it started feeling really, really intense. And I was put on the pill. I was put on the pill. I was not having the sex. That's not what was happening. But I was put on the pill. And what I was told is like, well, you have a boyfriend. It's probably going to be necessary for you to be on the pill. And at that time, I was like, the last thing anybody wants is to get pregnant when they're 17 or 18 years old. So what I discovered, and what many women have discovered, and what the two of you have devoted a tremendous amount of time and thought and love and research into, is that the pill is a hormonal manipulation of your body's natural cycles. And we take medications all the time that manipulate our bodies. That's not the issue per se. But it is a powerful drug with a lot of side effects. And it is not a mood regulator, although it is prescribed in many, many cases as a mood regulator. Many women who are given the pill don't even have basic information about what's going on in their bodies or what is normal. Many girls are put on the pill because they're told it will regulate their menstrual cycle before their body has even had enough of a menstrual cycle to regulate. Meaning a lot of girls will go in the first 2 months, 3 months and say, I'm not a clock like they tell me I should be. Well, let's put you on the pill and then you'll be regular. And many women experience staggering depression, what we call emotional lability, that kind of up and down, that kind of cycling back and forth. And something I'm concerned about is that the stereotyping of women and their moods, and even our notion of PMS, might actually be reflecting the hormonal manipulation of a system. And as I was saying, boys loved when I was a teenager being like, you're such a bitch. Are you PMSing? And I didn't get my period till I was literally out of high school. And I would say to boys, I don't even have a period. I'm just angry, and just, the notion that women, I mean, it's another form of hysteria, really, that diagnosis of like she's PMSing, business of being born, which I have to mention. I mean, talked about it, Jonathan and I both talked about it in the intro. Jonathan and I are both, home birth advocates and hippies. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan, what would you like to tell the ladies?
I think I said I wasn't going to mention it, but I did see the business of being born when my ex was pregnant with our son, who is now 12, and it had a huge impact. We were a part of the Los Angeles home birthing community, and we met a ton of midwives who were advocates of home birth, and we were a part of that community. And when that film came out, it had a huge impact on everyone, and everyone was talking about it, and put a lot of stats and context around what many people had intuited but couldn't really articulate and didn't have the justification.
This is an issue about women that's for everyone, meaning the notion of kind of segregating healthcare by sex, by gender, is a fallacy, because as you showed in The Business of Being Born, this is not something we talk about behind closed doors about women and their vaginas. This is about what impacts our lives, the lives of our children, the lives of our family, community, and the world. And I absolutely believe that that is such a tremendous gift that you have given. And what you introduced is this concept which people are terrified of. Terrified. What if everything that you've been told is not true? And not everything, but what if many things you've been told are not true? And that's how many of us felt about Business of Being Born, because we intuitively felt that we had a natural, organic right to our existence as parents, as feminists, as, people who had feminists as partners. And what I think is so beautiful about you continuing this with Sweetening the Pill is that you're taking that same radical notion of trying to bring information to people, because what if everything we've been told is not the whole story? So I guess I would like to know maybe, and maybe you can start, either of you or both of you are welcome. Did the Sweetening the Pill come kind of as an extension of Business of Being Born? Was it more about a philosophy of how to approach health? How did we get, from, like I said, the way you changed our lives and the lives of so many men and women, how did we get from there to here?
Abby, you went. Sweetening the Pill was the book that Holly Grigg-Spall wrote, and the movie we're calling The Business of Birth Control. So we kind of changed the title, but it's just like a natural curiosity. I mean, with The Business of Being Born, that stemmed from my experiences, and I love in the trailer of that film, it's like you will never look at giving birth the same way again. It's like it's just opening your eyes to like the way that we thought things were, and to a new paradigm, a new way of thinking. And so with Holly Grigg-Spall coming to Abby with the galley of this book, Abby just like, she read it and she's like, oh my God, this is so in our wheelhouse. This feels like the natural progression. We made a film in between about cannabis, about medicinal cannabis with children with pediatric cancer called Weed the People. But this definitely, this like niche that we have, this credibility that we built with The Business of Being Born, and I come from a place of like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not someone who finished college, but I'm someone that had a platform for a long time, and I'm naturally really curious about why things are the way they are. And I was so profoundly impacted by my experiences of the births of my two children. And the movie wasn't about me per se, but it stemmed from that experience. And yeah, I mean, that was one of those magical movies. I mean, just the way it unfolded, the way Abby came on board. Abby and I met, we met. She directed me in the vagina monologues. So it's like so apropos, but that's how we met and became friends. And so when I had this idea of wanting to explore, and it was all after 9/11. I don't know if you know that, Mayim, but I was doing my talk show for so many years, and I was just so disenchanted by what I was doing as my day job when, the world seemed upside down. 9/11 happened before my eyes. And I was like, okay, this, like, if I die, I thought I was going to die that day. And I'm like, if I die, this is my legacy. If I live through this day, I want it to be about something else. I want to leave a mark where I feel like I've made a difference. And so The Business of Being Born was that passion project that I didn't know what it was going to turn into. We certainly didn't expect Abby to get pregnant with her first child and have what happened to her. But it all was so serendipitous and a beautiful thing to leave behind. And the fact that it still has this life in it, that's still as evergreen today. And especially with COVID, this information that mothers and fathers to be have access to, this information of what to know and going into a hospital about your choices and your options. I mean, it's so relevant. And so, yeah, with the business of birth control, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. And more women are trying probably to keep from getting pregnant than to get pregnant. So I think it's just as potentially as impactful and as groundbreaking. At least that is my hope.
Since I shared my pill story, do either of you like to talk about your experience? I know, Ricki, you have talked about it, and not sure. Yeah, I if you feel like sharing, I'm very curious. The more women I talk to, the more I hear like, oh, no one even asked me. They just put me on it. Or, oh, well, I wasn't regular, so I had to go on. Or my moods were so terrible. Or like, I was bleeding too much. So what's the framework for you personally?
Okay, Abby, you want to go since I was hogging the mic? You go.
You never hug the mic, baby. You were born with a mic in your mouth. Yeah, I mean, my story, I think, is sort of typical in that same way of where it wasn't, I was sort of quote unquote put on the pill, not for birth control, but because I had gone to college and had basically stopped getting my period. And, my gynecologist didn't think that was a good thing and was kind of like, well, I think you should go on the pill because that would like regulate it. Now, knowing what I know now about how women's brains work, I 100% know that was actually probably a protective thing my body was doing my freshman year of college. There were like a lot of rapes going on campus. It was just an uncomfortable, like, environment for me, to be in this dorm and sharing a room with a stranger and sharing a bathroom and kind of being around boys and alcohol and like things I had never been around. I think there was actually a threat. And so I think that, your hypothalamus, am I saying that right? I think it's your hypothalamus that controls, right? Mm-hmm. These functions. So there was actually something very smart probably happening in my body. But, I was told, oh, no, you need to have that bleed every 4 weeks. We've got to medicate this. And of course, I'm sure they're thinking, oh, and even though I wasn't sexually active at the time, because I was also a super late bloomer, they're thinking, oh, well, we'll just cover that. It's like the pill, it like becomes this like catch-all, it's like, we'll just take care of that. It's like this one-stop shop. And then, and then she won't be able to get pregnant and everybody's happy. It's just that kind of catch-all type of thing. And I think that, going back to what your previous question was, Mayim, like, I think, the link that I see like between our two movies and what we're doing is that I think there are rites of passage that we experience as girls and as mothers, and as women, even in menopause, that are being medicated away. And, I think that when we were making The Business of Being Born, that was a new concept for me. The fact that Ricki, as my friend, could tell me that birth healed my body, that birth experience changed my life. It got me through my divorce. It healed my past of like, sexual traumas and other things I've experienced. Like that was like really newsbreaking for me, and I think the same way it's like approaching this movie. I think when you're put on that first pill at 12, 13, 14, you're not thinking, or no one's telling you that you're kind of losing, or not losing, but you're changing who you are, that your hormones make you who you are, and that you cannot be the same version of yourself when you're on these products, because whether it's a pill or an IUD or whatever, because you're not making your own hormones anymore. And for some people that can be a medical relief. And I totally understand that. And I think there are a lot of people that really suffer and really, are grateful to have synthetic hormones. But generally for like all the things you were saying, like, oh, I was put on it for bleeding or cramps, this is like this other half of the story that we're just never being told. So I think it's like, in the same way in these movies, we're just pulling back the curtain to say, let's look at this from another angle that we haven't really thought about. Let's look at what's being taken away, in terms of this convenience factor or this, or medical advancement.
Mm-hmm. Ricki, what about you?
Regarding my pill story.
Yeah, your pill story.
I was also a late bloomer. So I was not sexually active until I was almost 21. And I didn't have acne as a kid. Like I didn't, for the reasons that women would be. I got my period at 14, I remember. I wasn't educated. When I first went to my gyno, it was like this easy thing. Here you go. And they handed me a stack of, and for me, it saved me a trip of going to the pharmacy, and it didn't matter. Like every time I'd go once a year, I'd get a new brand, but I was like, all right, I'll just switch brands. I didn't question it because to me, doctor knows best. And and I remember even in my I'm trying to remember, it's hard, the timing, but I remember where you could actually skip your period altogether. You could
Yep.
keep taking it and not bleed. And I'm going to Italy on my whatever. I can just keep like the idea of manipulating my body in that way was never something I thought there'd be a con to. Like I just thought, oh, the magic of medicine. And my dad is a pharmacist, so I grew up taking Tylenol codeine like it was nothing, with a headache. I mean, honestly, I was so just statins were nothing to me. And now I've gone the other way completely. My main side effect that to this day is traumatizing was the hair loss that I went through with being on and off these pills, and being I was on the copper IUD. I mean, I just would manipulate my system in such a way that it did take its toll, with my vanity, and I know a lot of women, I've joined support groups for, dealing with hair loss. And so many women accredit the pill, the hormonal birth control, as being the main reason why they're losing their hair, or their hair never grew back. It never recovered. And so had I known that it does shut down your hormonal system and it does change who you are. I mean, the things, all the things I learned from making the business of being born too. It's like the film I wish I'd had available to me when I was first family planning. This, for my daughters, I don't have daughters, but my grandchildren or whatever, you want to have access to this information, and you want everyone to have access to all the options, including the pills if they want it, but we want them to know what they're taking and what it can do to you.
So who are the populations, that are kind of being most mistreated in terms of overprescription and misuse? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because look, the fact is a lot of doctors, they often are seeing populations that they may not get for follow-ups. I grew up in the Kaiser system. My parents were my dad was a public school teacher in Los Angeles. And so our insurance was through Kaiser, whereas, you wouldn't always get the same doctor. You didn't get an appointment when you want. So it was a lot like, you got 15 minutes with me, fix as many things as you can, and I may never see that person again. So what about kind of the system of medicine as we know it is affecting which populations most?
I think in general, the way that OBGYNs are trained, is, we have this cultural fear around pregnancy, right? So let's say, for example, like when we were interviewing doctors in Denmark, they would say, well, one of the main differences is that here, early abortions are completely unstigmatized. And, terminating a pregnancy in the first 6 weeks is like covered. It's a procedure. It's like something that, it's like, so I think that also takes some of the stress, right, off like being on something and you cannot get pregnant. It is like a disease that will ruin your life. That is like how it's treated, right? And so I think there are populations that you call like at risk, right? Populations that they call, right? Low income or uneducated. And those populations, I think, are particularly vulnerable. I think women of color are particularly vulnerable. They have been historically given much more of Depo-Proveras and Norplants and the more really toxic, long-acting types of contraception because they're not to be, trusted. Right? Poor women are not to be trusted and they need to be on something. And in fact, Ricki, you should tell this story, but we had a really interesting debate when we started the movie, when Ricki was on the board of a nonprofit. And will you tell the story, Ricki? Because I think that was like one of their biggest concerns.
Yeah, so I was working with a group called the National Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy. I'm not sure if you're aware of them. They're out of DC. And, my old talk show we did a ton of work with teenage pregnancy and prevention and awareness. And so I was, I worked with them regularly. I did PSAs for them. And so this was right when we were just starting the film. We put out a 2-sentence blurb about our new project. And they immediately dumped me off the board without asking any questions about the film. The idea that we were, challenging, these drugs, they could not have any involvement whatsoever. And it was just a shocking, there was no phone call, nothing. And, it just said a lot. It said a lot. It's like, you know, there isn't room, or there hasn't been room to be able to be a feminist and challenge these, you know, obviously we appreciate and are grateful to have had access, but we want more options. We want there to be options for men, you know, we want, you know, so.
And I think also when we spoke to her, because remember we called the woman, the president of the board, we had like a really long conversation with her, and she just said, you don't understand. We are on the Hill fighting every day. We are fighting the right. We are fighting to protect this access and reproductive rights. And if you are going to tell women that there's a negative, you know, impact to taking these products that they already don't want to take, you know, they're going to go off them. And we were kind of trying to explain to her that, you know, we didn't think that any women, any kind of women, I don't care what their demographic is, if they are on something that makes them feel terrible, you know, 60% of women go off the pill in the first year because of side effects, right? So how is that good birth control, right? If you're just going to do nothing, then you're just going to stop taking it because you feel terrible on it or all your hair falls out. So, you know, we understood like her point from a different generation of feminism, but I think that at this point, you know, yes, I do believe that, you know, it is your right to have informed consent and access, and that every, you know, menstruating person, there may be a time in your life where, you know, the pill or the IUD is a good thing. You know, maybe you are in med school for 5 years, or you're in the army or whatever it is, and you're like, I just don't want to think about it. I just can't take any risks. You know, I just going to go on this, you know, fantastic. But the whole point is that when you're making those choices, you should understand that if you then slide into a depression or suddenly have, you know, panic attacks that you've never had before, you should at least understand that, oh my God, that could be because of this pill that I started taking a few months ago. You know, and that's, I think, where we get frustrated, where, you know, there is no connecting of the dots at all to the symptoms and the side effects. And some of the side effects are like crazy, like things that I'd never heard of till I made this film, like crazy, like your ovaries and your clitoris shrinking up to 25%.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. That's a real side effect. Ovarian shrinkage and clitoral shrinkage. Like that's something your mama never told you. I mean, there are so many side effects, and you hear all these different stories, and it's all anecdotal, right? And then when women bring these side effects into the doctor's office, they get gaslighted. They get told, you know, well, it's all in your head. And, you know, so I think that it's like so much about, you know, we're not saying, oh, you know, take away, you know, hormonal birth control from at-risk populations or from anybody who freely wants to use it. It's just like, you know, let's give some real information around this. You know what I mean? And also let's present alternatives. There are no alternatives.
This episode is brought to you by Rothy's.
I love Rothy's.
Tell us about Rothy's.
I've been wearing Rothy's for years, and I am so excited that they are sponsoring this podcast. They're very, very comfortable. They're washable. They're sustainable. They're made from recycled plastic water bottles. They make getting dressed easy. Their shoes are comfortable with zero break-in period thanks to their seamlessly knit-to-shape design. So many styles to choose from and so many new styles that I didn't even know existed. Rothy's shoes are the perfect way to add comfort and style to your closet, and also in a way that's very, very gentle to the environment. It's no surprise Rothy's best-selling shoe, I've owned it, the Point in Black, has over 3,000 near-perfect reviews. They're knit with thread, made from plastic water bottles. Does everyone understand what I'm saying?
It's almost unimaginable.
They're soft. They're super comfortable. They've transformed over 75 million bottles into beautiful shoes. They also make gorgeous handbags, and their face masks are lovely. Another major bonus, they are fully machine washable. I have done this. You put them in the washing machine and they come out and they look like new. They're washable, durable, and flexible. Their signature thread, which is made from repurposed plastic water bottles, minimizes their impact on the planet, maximizes comfort for you. I love these shoes.
Check out all the amazing shoes and bags and masks available right now at rothys.com/breakdown. That's rothys.com, rothys.com/breakdown.
Style and sustainability meet to create your new favorites. Head to rothys.com/breakdown today and wear Rothys like I do.
This episode is brought to you by Audible.
Audible. Love our Audible.
I am addicted to Audible.
Audible's the leading provider of spoken word entertainment all in one place. You can find audiobooks, bestsellers, new releases, celebrity memoirs, languages, business motivation, original entertainment from top celebrity creators, thousands of popular and binge-worthy podcasts. You can always find the perfect title for whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, and whatever you're feeling. What are some of the things you might feel, Jonathan?
You can look for comedy, romance, suspense, crime, science fiction, fitness, wellness. There's a lot of innovation in business books that I've listened to.
You can squeeze in a workout or guided meditation without even having to go to a gym or class. With everything you love to listen to all in one app, Audible is your playlist for life. New members can always try Audible for 30 days on them. And with an Audible membership, you can download titles and listen offline, anytime, anywhere. The app is free. It can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Listen across devices without losing your spot. It's so frustrating when you lose your spot.
You're going to love Audible. My son and I compete for who's going to use the monthly credit. We're both so look forward to getting that new material.
We've listened to an audiobook together on Audible.
We have.
That was fun. As an Audible member, you get 1 credit every month, good for any title in the premium selection. That means the latest bestseller, the buzziest new release, the hottest celebrity memoir, or that bucket list title you've been meaning to pick up. Those titles are yours to keep forever in your Audible library.
Visit audible.com/MBB or text MBB to 500 500.
Audible, your playlist for life. Obviously, the focus of this podcast is on mental health, and this is a really special episode to be able to give attention to the female experience because we are different. We're different from men, and as we've talked about, there are very specific things that our hormonal systems are primed to do. And I guess maybe you could speak a little bit to the feeling terrible. I think for me, like as someone who has had mental health challenges. Like I said, I had them before I even knew that wasn't normal, as a young child. And the fact is, like, I can't say that if I wasn't on the pill from 19 to 29, that I wouldn't have had challenges. But maybe you can speak a little bit to the specific kind of mental health sort of red flags that we do see and need to acknowledge, even if it's not popular or trendy to do so. And this is not condemning birth control, but can you talk a little bit about sort of what do you see as the potential on not only the mental health of women, but then the perception of the mental health of women?
Oh, God.
I mean, Sarah Hill's book, everyone should read that. This is Your Brain on Birth Control. I mean, and like, I'm just piecing together the dots in the making of this film. Like, I'm just going back because we're talking 30 years that I started birth control, and did I deal with depression? Did I deal with, I don't even remember, but I didn't even question how I felt. I assumed it was just me being me, But what specifics would you say, Abby, as far as...
Well, I would say what you said is just so important. And so many people we interviewed for this film said that in the milder cases of like mood side effects with birth control, they actually could only identify it in retrospect. So they actually didn't realize it until they went off. Like Sarah Hill, who Ricki just mentioned, I remember when we were interviewing her, she said it was like my life had been a 2-dimensional drawing. And then when I stopped the pill, it went 3D. And she didn't realize, and that's what's so deceptive. It's like your brain does this your brain is not very good at like seeing itself from the outside, like your brain isn't very good at that. So whatever your reality is, it's like, you just believe this is me. These feelings are real, and I remember that even the week before I was put on the pill in college, she gave me like a week of like crazy I don't even know what it was. It was like some kind of estrogen crack. I don't even know what it was, but I had to take that like every day to like bring on a period. And I just like, I remember like riding my bike to class, like weeping, like weaving and weeping on this bicycle, like just sobbing. And like, I literally, I mean, looking back, I'm like, I don't know. I thought I was like having a nervous breakdown. I was like, I thought like my acting class was too hard. I don't, you know what I mean? I just, the feelings felt like so real to me. You know what I mean? And I think that's the problem is there's this, it's very hard, you know, to pull back and try to identify what's being caused, you know, by these shifts. But with some women, and we have some of these stories in our film, it's extreme, right? So for some, it's very extreme. They develop, you know, severe anxiety disorders or really severe mood disorders. They end up, you know, taking medication for those disorders, you know, without even sort of looking at what's beneath the soil and sort of understanding what the root problem is. You know, so I know, and some women don't have any really mental health side effects at all, but I think that in general, it's like women's mental health is so, it's so diminished. It's so diminished. It's just like, we're just kind of supposed to feel shitty a lot of the time. And right. And it's just hormonal and, or it's PMS and, you know, and that isn't normal, you know, that really isn't.
And I think one of the things that I've also spoken to both of you about, and, you know, which is sort of the scientific space that I live in, is that the hormones that we are given are the same hormones that have been given to primates and to other mammals for tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of millions of years of evolution. My brain doesn't know that I'm a child actor who went to college and like, you know, and like then wanted to return to acting and like, oh, I got a divorce because like, oh, it wasn't right. Like whatever. My brain doesn't know that. My brain knows that we make one egg a month. And it is a very special egg. It is so special. And my body is going to do an elaborate dance to get the right environment to secure the ability to pass on the genetic information that's in those 23 chromosomes. And I want to find someone like big and tough and kind of mean, because they're going to look like the kind of person who can fend off all the men who are going to be lining up, you know? Like
could be a hunter.
Exactly. I need a hunter so that I may gather, you know? So like that's what my brain thinks. And what my brain knows is that in the week leading up to ovulating, it's like the party's about to happen because this egg is so special that we're going to create this environment where my insides are very happy and I'm going to be both, you know, chemically receptive and very seductive because I'm going to show my best and most attractive self, right? And when I'm with that person, those hormones may also make me not make great choices by our cultural standards.
Right.
But I'm going to do the things to secure that situation. And I think that that's something that we wish and hope that the women's movement would take away. You know, I don't want to be either of my grandmothers. I don't want to be clinically depressed and addicted to painkillers because no one pays attention to me and no one cares. You know, like I don't want that either, but my brain doesn't know that I'm not in the jungle. So that's kind of one part. And the second thing, this podcast has been like Mayim having giant revelations. I'm going to tell a story that I've literally only told to my therapist and to my ex-husband. My 20s were a shitstorm. Let's just say it. My 20s were a shitstorm. And what it was like was I was on every medication known to women for anxiety, for panic attacks, for depression, for mania. If anyone's had mania, it's no joke. I was at the position when I wanted to get pregnant that I had to be put on, I had been on medication since before since right around the time that I was put on the pill. So let's start that story. And my 20s were a total wash emotionally. God bless my now ex-husband for honestly getting me out of bed. many weeks and months of our relationship. And, you know, I look back at pictures. I remember when we announced our engagement to my parents, and I look at that picture, like I had been crying for hours, and it was nothing about the relation. Like that's just where I lived. I lived in this kind of thing. And when I wanted to get pregnant, I was put on a medication that made me gain 30 pounds because it was the only one that was safe because of my complicated psychiatric issues. I had to get consults with 2 women specialists in psychiatry to even be granted the ability to try and breastfeed because I was deemed so delicate of a human. And I was specifically told, you cannot breastfeed. You cannot nurse at night. You have to get a night nurse. I'm like, I can barely afford organic potatoes. I'm not getting a night nurse. But I was specifically told I was a psychiatric risk. The psychiatrist that I had been seeing, who was a man, and I believe he was trying to do a good job, he told me the only way he would allow me to taper off my medication, which was an SSRI. I mean, I was on several. The only way was if I maintained contact with him, had to speak to him 3 times a week with a newborn. I said, I don't think that's happening. He completely took away even my ability to believe that my therapist and I, who spoke weekly, could monitor my condition. And I swear to you, what I said is after I had that child, something switched in my body. And I was not on a psychotropic or psychiatric medication for over a decade after having my first child. And I remember saying to myself, oh, having children, it changed me. I haven't had proper mania since I had my kid. I haven't had proper mania. I do not even meet the diagnoses that psychiatrist gave me. I breastfed all night and all day, every 2 hours. I barely slept and I rocked that shit out. Was I depressed and likely could have been helped by an antidepressant? Probably. But the fact is, I was a functioning, competent mother. I was a functioning, competent woman. Did I do it perfectly? No. Did I have to get help for the other ways that my brain was rocked by becoming a parent and every trauma I never knew I had to deal with that I finally was dealing with? Of course. But it never occurred to me until this conversation that all those times when I was like, I haven't been on medication since my kid was, something flipped in me. I also couldn't go on roller coasters again, but I don't think that's a safe story. But it never occurred to me that confluence of my 20s and all of those diagnoses and me being, things in my medical records that I was like, God forbid if this ever got leaked, I'm being told I have some very serious conditions that are really scary. And it's so fascinating to me. I think of my mother who got married at 18. She had to spend her whole 20s with my crazy father. They were both crazy. But I thought I was doing well as a woman because I was independent. And here I was, but I was being pumped with all sorts of chemicals, Anyway, that's my confessional.
Wow. So do you think there was a rewiring? And you had no postpartum depression? None.
No, I mean, I kind of operate in dysthymia. I'm sort of always low, but
yeah.
No, all the things that psychiatrist terrified me about. And my therapist said, he's taking away your ability to even have the confidence that you can monitor your own psychiatric condition. Mm-hmm. And I did not have postpartum depression. Was I overwhelmed? Yes. Did my ex-husband sleep later than I wanted him to every bloody day? Of course. But I also was not a crazy, oh my God, my baby's so cute. I had trouble breastfeeding. I was bleeding in the breast department. I was bleeding for weeks and months.
Oh, yeah.
I had that's why I became a lactation educator counselor. I had a Velcro baby who wouldn't be put down. This was not an easy child. And my second was even more difficult. But like I said, and my second was a home birth where I said, if I could do that, don't you dare tell me you know better than I do. How I'm going to be. I'm going to nurse this baby all freaking night because it's the way that my ex-husband will complain less and I will too. So yeah, I really I think that what you're doing is it's so critically important, not just because of what it does for us in understanding how we view medicine, but it's so important in how we view women's autonomy, women's voices, and we can't use that broad brush of liberation to the exclusion of women who believe that part of our empowerment is knowing our bodies. And that's what, the two of you give as a gift. It's really unbelievable.
God, well said. I agree. And for me, the piece of like the idea that who you're attracted to is affected by whether you are on these drugs or not was like the aha moment for me.
Let's
Like
talk
that
about that for a
concept.
second.
Well, you as a neuroscientist could say it better than me, but I mean that concept of like partnering, choosing your partner when you're medicated and
It
not
seems to make me want emotionally unavailable men. What's that?
Yeah, or I mean, it boggles the mind, you know, to think of like who Abby was, you know, chose in her 20s or who I chose and how things might have turned out differently. Now, obviously we wouldn't change anything, but it's just a fascinating concept that I never considered. And, you know, it's scientific. There's the t-shirt test and
Jonathan's all about that t-shirt test.
We were talking about this in our intro. If anyone has a link to that, we'll post it on the website.
I was teasing Jonathan's Henley. He doesn't usually wear Henleys. And he said maybe it's better for his pheromones to escape when he's in a t-shirt. He's trying to keep him in that Henley.
Bring on the pheromones. Yeah, it's incredible to me. Yeah. And I just think, you know, women, it's just something to know and consider. And you might make a different choice about your healthcare, you know, and about what is true autonomy, true body literacy. Is it relying on a pharmaceutical to tell you exactly when you're going to bleed next month when it's not really a period? Or is it really understanding how your body works and appreciating, like, you know, for me, I'm 52 and I still get a regular cycle. I still get my period every 26 and 27 days. And I appreciate it. Now, granted, you know, I'm perimenopausal and I'm, you know, waiting for it to stop, but every month that my body works and that to know that I'm more creative at this time of the month and to embrace that. It's just like flipping it on its head. It's like, I used to hate my period. I used to be like, you know, now I really do appreciate every nuance to it.
Well, and I think also, and I talked about this in the intro, you know, as a person who, you know, has studied, you know, we call them the laws of, you know, family purity is what it's called in Hebrew. But, you know, as someone who's studied that for thousands of years, Jewish women have been tracking our cycles, like it's in the Old Testament, it's in the Talmud. And yes, the attention to women's sexuality is obscene in many cases. But, you know, what Anita Diamond did by turning that on its head with the notion of the red tent, like I was saying that, you know, every egg is a possible life. And that is holy and sacred in its own way. So for me to be able to say that when it's that time of month, and I do call it my moon cycle, when I'm on my moon cycle, like that's a time of a different kind of reflection. And the notion also, and like, I don't mean to go full hippie on you, but I will, and we can always edit it out. You know, the notion of the way that we grew up learning about feminine protection, that you had to be protected from something that meant you hide it, you shouldn't know about it. You shouldn't think about it. I can't tell you how many young women I've spoken to who say, like, I don't even know what goes on because I just put a tampon. I don't want to think about it. And like, I'm not arguing for like the free bleed movement. It's not really my thing. But the notion that we don't know what's normal, you know, when I do pregnancy consults for women just about post-labor, because it does affect, you know, breastfeeding and all those things, many women don't even know that it's normal to bleed for 6 weeks, you know, after you give birth. Like, we don't even know as women what's normal so that we can know when there's a problem. And that's one of the kind of neat things about the level of tracking that, you know, many religious Jewish women do, is we are taught to know our bodies so that we know very, very clearly when something's not right. And being in touch that way is something that is not for everyone. I totally get it. But we've also been acculturated to believe that it is not something to know about, that it's dirty, we have to hide it, we need protection around it. And that forms the way men treat us. It forms the way we treat ourselves. I mean, the fact that my mother never even mentioned to me a cycle is astounding. She was so grateful I was a late bloomer. She was slapped in the face when she started her period because that's what happened then.
Right. And it's like, I think if you understand what you can sort of, the information you can mine, like you were saying, about understanding your cycle, knowing your cycle. I remember the first time, I think it was even Keith Bell, Ricki, when I was talking to some Chinese medicine doctor and they were trying to diagnose something and he was like, well, what color is your menstrual blood? And I was like, huh? What do you mean? I just flushed that. I mean, I mean, I just couldn't believe it. And he was like, well, I mean, is it like dark red? Is it bright red? Does it have a tail at the end? That could mean you're low on progesterone. I was like, oh. Like, it's so misogynistic that this information is just hidden and suppressed. And like, it's almost, there's that whole story, I think, where an Apple came out with their like health, app, and they didn't put the menstrual cycle in because it's like not considered a vital sign. And you're missing the boat. It's like, I wish, like, now I'm so into like the moon, like I listen to all the moon podcasts and I like sync my cycle to the moon and I'm like, live my life by the moon and what day of my cycle.
Hey, but who's taking an erotic sovereignty class? Me.
Yes. And if I would be right there with you, sister. I mean, and I wish I had this in my 20s, but then I think, but in my 20s, I wasn't cycling, right? So it's like, I actually was like on the pill the whole time. So I wouldn't have been having any of these like cycles and connections to the moon. But it's so cool. Like, I wish I had this back in my 20s. And I see, these women now that are that age. And I do feel like, this shit is not going to fly with them. They are much more conscious about endocrine disruptors, about food, about environment, about, you know what I mean? Like, at the same time, I'm saying they're freezing their eggs and like, you know what I mean? At the same time, it's like, there's, everybody wants like, they want
it all. What's with those young feminists? They want it all.
They want it all. And that's okay. But, I still think that it's like, I definitely see change on the horizon for sure. Absolutely. And I do see even like in the world in terms of like mental health, like one of the things that like a lot of people talked about in the movie is one of the things that the pill does is it like destroys your microbiome. Okay. And so that gut health and the inflammation that the pill creates affects mental health, right? So like that's a connection that nobody talked about, right? Like the gut-brain connection, the microbiome connection, the mental health connection. People are waking up to that for sure. But, I do see now even like, I think different approaches to mental health. And I think that people are looking at, right, more of like lifestyle interventions. And lifestyle interventions can also work with reproductive health. And that's the thing, like, your period it's not going to be like perfect, like clockwork. It's not going to be like, regular and no cramps. And, it's like, it's same thing as your birth. Like everyone's not going to have these like storybook labors, they're going to be, and you need female wisdom. You need wisdom. You need midwifery and you need doulas and birth control doulas and lactation consultants. You need this like wisdom team to kind of navigate us through our physiology and how to work with it.
That's a perfect place for me to say, like, thank you both for being part, of starting this aspect of this revolution. It's really, really, it's an honor to speak to both of you and just get to know you better through the work that you're doing. And also, Ricki, like I grew up watching you, and it's so amazing to see the way you've really transformed yourself. Not that you needed transforming, but like such an amazing extra set of levels to the person that you are. And it's so beautiful to see the two of you working together. Because I know how important it is to have Jonathan as my partner. Like I'm only as good as the people who support me, but also like it's such an inspiration for me to see someone who's had success and who's been under such public scrutiny as you have, actually being a real person using your platform in such a beautiful way. So thank you so much, and I can only pray to have hair like you one day. So I'll.
It looks good.
It looks fantastic.
It's looking good.
Tell us where we can find all the good things.
Oh God. Well, we the only thing we can say we can offer is that we have a body literacy summit, and Mayim was our opening conversation.
That was a really fun conversation.
It's
great.
Really, really good. And that is going to be available on our website. It is 17 hours.
Yeah, it is. It's not even enough.
Not even.
It's just the tip of the iceberg. And the
So
film
you can find that on our website, which is thebusinessof.life.
Awesome.
So that we will have out in like a week, and the film we will have out next year.
Well,
we
we
should hear
cannot
soon.
wait. We cannot wait.
The business of .life for everyone listening or watching. We'll also link to it on the website under this podcast episode.
Yeah, and we'll also link to Sweetening the Pill because I think it's important also as a resource. So
Yeah,
all those good things.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Oh,
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure. I adore you.
Thank you.
And I hope we continue these conversations, in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you both. That was Ricki and Abby. I have known Ricki since I was in high school because she was dating someone who was in a play called The Real Life Brady Bunch, which was directed by, a little director called Jill Soloway.
Oh, wow.
And Jill and Faith directed and produced episodes of The Brady Bunch that they would then script and perform at the Geffen Theater, at the Geffen Playhouse in Westwood. And I went 29 times because you'd see a different episode every time. And Ricki was dating one of the actors. And so we kind of like hung out, like, because I would go 29 times. And I was like that teenage girl on TV who was obsessed with weird theater. So Ricki and I have known each other a very long time. And she's a very good person. And I'm very, very pleased that they spoke with us. And obviously the issue of, women's health as it relates to the pill takes us into issues of women's rights and abortion and socioeconomic privilege. But I think that the impact on mental health of, a very large prescription of a drug which has implications for your mental health is significant. And I think it deserves attention. And that does not mean that people should not take the pill. It doesn't mean that it should not be available to populations that need access to it. I also don't know about countries that make early abortions, very much part of kind of primary care as they describe. I don't know about that. What I do know is that women do tend to be on the receiving end, of a lot of medical discussions and medical care in ways that may not always serve our best interests, especially when it relates to our mental health. And part of this is because of the patriarchy. Just going to let that sit. Part of it is because we've been left out of medical decision-making, specifically for the last several hundred years. That is changing. It needs to continue to change. But before the last 200 years or so, women's health care was in the hands of women. And yes, women died because people died. And women did not die because of women being in charge of their care. I appreciate men and all of the things that they've done, but the advances in medicine and hygiene are extremely significant. What's more important is that we are returning now to an understanding of women's health as often being served well by women. And one of the ways that this continues to change is for you to know more about your body. And this goes for men and women. My sons know what a period is. Do they love talking about it? No. Do I gross them out about it? I mean, they get grossed out by a lot of things that are not familiar to them. But I do not hide when I have my moon cycle. I do not leave things out for the whole universe, but I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of my moods because the 2 weeks, and as you get older, it gets harder, the 2 weeks leading up to my period are often very difficult. They often are. And what I do is I don't add extra stress to myself. I don't demand of myself things that I don't feel prepared. And that doesn't mean I lay in bed, but I get migraines with my cycle. And my children know when mommy has a migraine, she sometimes cannot tolerate their voices or anything visual. That's just my story. Do I feel like a fainting lady in the 1800s? Sometimes. Sometimes I get very debilitated by migraines. And yes, they are related to my menstrual cycle. Do I believe in taking birth control to avoid that? No. Because what it is my body's way of saying, this is a lot, and here are all the natural and lifestyle things that I can do to make that time of the month easier. Mostly not interacting with any other humans, specifically people that I might romantically be interested in. That doesn't sound like a fix?
That slowing down sounds like the premise of the red tent.
Girlfriends of mine and I, who especially went through home birth together and were part of the whole parenting, we would love to only interact with each other for that week. Literally, we've said why do I have to deal with all these people? Absolutely, I see that purpose. And that is not at all to condone, I'm feeling anger, the many, 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 many places in this world where women's bodies are denigrated and feared and punished simply for existing, nor is it to condone the policy of many countries to punish women for having bodies. But the notion of a revolution in the way we think about women's health is to try and honor our experience in ways that support not only our... When mama's happy, everyone's happy. That's what I always used to remind my ex-husband while we were married. That means that the woman's mental health is often what does dictate the terms of a household. That's true, because that is our domain. That's the moon. You know, it's the moon, as it were. Ask Mayim anything. Yeah.
Our Ask Mayim Anything question today comes from Erica from Nashville, who asks, if I come from a family with mental health issues, does that mean I will have mental health issues?
Great question. The short answer is probably. As we have talked about and will continue to talk about, mental health challenges are a combination of a genetic predisposition and an environmental set of pressures or circumstances. And what we do know is that as we get more self-aware as a society, as we reduce the stigma of mental health more, and as we include in our education of young people the ability to learn about our bodies and ourselves and to speak freely about our identity, we absolutely are tipping the scales and will continue to tip the scales for those mental health challenges which we might inherit not being as significant for us. And while there are certain mental illnesses that have a stronger genetic component, and I'm not going to go into the kind of microbiology details of that, we do know that getting people not even help, but education, earlier rather than later. We didn't even used to talk about the mental health stuff in my family. It was either whispered or there was a euphemism, for what was going on. And the fact that we don't have to do that anymore, I think is really, really great support for the notion that we do not have to suffer the way our parents or grandparents did. We've got a ways to go. And also, medication is so much more sophisticated than it was for our parents and grandparents. There are a lot of medications with far less side effects than there used to be. So if we do have mental health challenges, we also have the opportunity to live much richer and fuller and less problematic lives, than our parents or grandparents did. So that hopefully is comforting. I'm no fun at cocktail parties when people are like, "We have Parkinson's in my family. Am I going to get it?" Like that's a different, that's a different conversation. But with mental health, much broader spectrum, and the more things we do also to understand ourselves, the less likely those mental health kind of predispositions are going to catch up with us.
What was the euphemism that your family used to use?
Well, I had a great aunt who talked to cars.
Did they talk back?
She was schizophrenic, and they didn't call it. They didn't know what it was. Like, they barely spoke English. But, it was always this kind of like, oh, the one who talked to cars. And it's like, it wasn't that they were teasing her, but like that's what it was, One of my cousins, his wife died in childbirth and their son was placed in an institution. There had been oxygen deprivation, and this was the 40s and 50s. There was no conversation about that or about the impact on the other child who just lost his mother. We didn't talk about those things. I mean, when I was a kid, you didn't even talk about cancer, unless you whispered it. So a lot has changed.
We just didn't know. I had a cousin who, when he was young, he was always talking to himself while we were playing, and we later realized that he had some challenges. But at that time, when we were 8 and 9,
sure,
however many years ago that was, we just didn't know.
No, we also didn't know about learning disabilities. They just called you dumb if you couldn't understand something, or the teachers were like, oh, this isn't for you. Let's just avoid that. We'll just go over it. We'll send you all the way to high school, even though you don't have a mastery of reading and writing, because nobody knew what to call it. Thankfully, that's changed.
It's changing.
It's changing.
So if you want to ask Mayim anything, go to bialikbreakdown.com.
And you can sign up to date me, and then you can ask me anything you want.
That's
where you were going?
Well, that's a different submission form. Hasn't been added to the website yet, but maybe that's a V2 version. The current version, Bialik, breakdown.com, there is a section where you can submit a question.
Also, that's V3.
That's V3. Ask Mayim anything. Go to the website.
Let's talk about you might need help if. You might need help if you don't know why you're on the pill. Meaning, you were told to go on the pill. The expression we kept using, you were put on the pill. You might want to explore it. And that's the help I'm talking about in this case. You might need help if you don't know how your natural hormonal cycle actually works or how birth control alters that. Now, I'm not telling you need to be able to draw the curve of estrogen, luteinizing hormone, progesterone. It's a beautiful chart. I might have to post that on the website. It is one of, we could also frame it above your head.
We could just put it right behind here.
I have it tattooed on my body and yours. But you don't have to be able to understand the chart. I'm not asking you to be a neuroscientist about it or an endocrinologist. What I'm asking for you to know is that there are specific hormonal patterns that do change the way you think, the way your tummy functions, the way your mental health functions. All those things are normal because we are humans. That's what normal is. You might need help if you don't know what other options you have for birth control or mood control. If you don't know either of those things and you've been told the pill is the answer, please learn more. You may need help if you've been given a laundry list by a doctor, and it could be a woman doctor. Don't think just because you go to a woman doctor that everything's going to be okay. They are trained in the same facilities that male doctors are. You may need help if you've been given a laundry list by a doctor about all of the reasons the pill is the best thing ever to happen, but you feel a little bit unsure. And you may decide that they're right, but if you have that feeling of like, what's really, you might want to explore that more. You also might need help if you have significant troubling mood swings, either on or off hormonal birth control, which leave you depressed, agitated, hostile, or violent for the weeks preceding your menstrual cycle. There are many people who have specific psychotic depression before their moon cycle starts. That's not PMS. There is a separate diagnosis for women who get a specific kind of psychotic depression. These are things you deserve to know about. That's what I have to say about that. Do you have anything else to say? I don't know if I want to know the answer to that.
You might need help if you listen to Abby talking about menstrual information, which it sounds like there's a lot of data in there that most people have no idea about. And if you want more information about that data and how to find it, which I have absolutely no idea how to do, you might need help.
Seems like Jonathan needs help.
That's why I'm here, Mayim.
From my breakdown to the one that I hope you never have. See you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or two. One fiction, and now she's gonna break down